Hey guys, Andy N, spoken label, back in the house. Sunday tea time. We're across the seas today, and I've been speaking to this lady's agent for a few months now, and she sent over a book to me a couple of months ago. This is the book by the wonderful Judy Foreman. Let the more loving one be me, and this is a really heart-stealing book. So as soon as her agent sent it to me, I knew I had to get Judy on. Now, Judy, obviously, the people who don't know you, would you like to first of all introduce yourself to us? Tell people where you're from and
Okay.
what started off your creative journey.
Okay. Well, I don't know quite what started it, but my name is Judy Foreman. And if you're looking me up, it's Foreman, very British way of spelling the name. Um, I have been a journalist for most of my life, and it's been actually wonderful. I mean, there's been some downtimes, but basically, it's been a wonderful fit between my personality and my work. And I know a lot of people don't get that. And it's such a blessing when you get that because I often felt that I would do what I did for a living, even if they didn't pay me. And that's a really nice feeling. I was a health columnist for the Boston Globe for many years and a science writer. I've written three books for Oxford University Press based on science, one on chronic pain, and my favorite is called Exercise is Medicine. I'm a big exercise fanatic, I guess I could say. But the book is really science based, very accessible, but science based on all the things at the molecular level that go on with exercise that help restore your brain and your muscles and your immune system and your gut and basically just about every organ system in the body and literally do slow down the pace of aging. There are a number of, I think, 12 or 13 basic things that happen with aging biologically, and exercise can slow all of those down. My fourth book was a novel, it was a medical thriller, blurbed by no less than Robin Cook, the medical thriller king.
Well done.
And it's also based on science. It's based on the new gene editing technique called CRISPR, CRISPR. And my book has a D at the end, so it's CRISPR apostrophe D. And although CRISPR is a wonderful technique that literally has the promise of curing a number of genetic mutations that cause disease, I chose to write about an evil geneticist, and he is outed by a young female reporter, much like myself. And so that's a real thriller. And then the book we're here to talk about today is my first memoir.
Obviously, I said people would know me by now. I have read the current book, I've said. We have to touch on the other four books before we get onto this anyway. But I want to learn, first of all, what made you want to do your fiction novel, which came out last year from Skyhorse Publishing, after doing three books of more
I have
non-fiction, you could say.
no idea.
Love it.
I don't know, but it was a fascinating, it was, and I'm working on another novel now. It's a fascinating process because with journalism, you try to tell the truth as best you can figure it out, all in the first paragraph, ideally, maximum clarity, no red herrings, no little breadcrumbs to lead people astray, just accurate, straightforward, as clear as possible. For a medical thriller, I had to really rewrite it a bunch of times so it didn't sound like a newspaper story to make sure I didn't tell everything up front, left some secrets, threw in some confusing things. So it's very different from journalism. And even in with the my second novel, it's really hard to get rid of that journalistic voice that wants to make things really clear. And as a novelist, you're trying to really spin out a tale. So I'm definitely on a learning curve with that, but it's a fun learning curve.
No, I agree with you completely. You wouldn't necessarily know this, Judy. Like, I've been a poet all my life, really, before breaking into podcasting, say, what, 6, 7 years ago now. And I'm just about to bring up my first novel actually next month.
Oh,
It should
wow.
be
What's it
out.
about?
Mine's someone's called a fictional retelling of my childhood, but it's not because it's just talk a load of lies. But it's just the birth of a writer, basically, a young man. That's all. So,
Oh,
but you're
that's
right.
great.
Yes, well, I think you're right. What you know sometimes, and
Oh,
that's
you
why I
have
think,
to.
yeah, and I
Yeah,
think your case, what you've done with the novel there, certainly what I've read about it, it's certainly you're using your experience to tell the story like I am as well. So
right.
I think it's a great move. So which it
Yeah, I agree.
makes it very interesting, really, because like I said before, we're here today to talk about your memoir, really. Let the more loving one be me. Now, you've lived quite a life, and that's a good way of putting it, I think. So,
Thank
what's
you.
made you want to tell this story?
Well, I didn't set out to write a book, write a memoir. I am in this group. In the United States, we call it lifelong learning. A lot of universities have these kind of learning in retirement programs. And Harvard, which is right here near Boston, in Cambridge, our Cambridge, has a wonderful lifelong learning program. It's called Harvard Institute for Learning and Retirement. I wasn't really retired. I'm still not really retired, but it has a great program. And I just by chance decided to take a memoir writing class to see what it would be like. And, we wrote every week and criticized each other's pieces. And I took the course several times. And before I knew it, I had a whole stack of short memoirs, some of them funny, some of them sad, some of them interesting, hopefully many of them interesting. And I thought, I really might have a book here. And then the task was to organize it in a way that made sense with some sort of through lines to kind of keep things strung together in a comprehensible way. I ended up kind of using chronology as the sort of flow of the book, which finally worked. I tried to do it thematically, and then chronology made more sense. So I put it together, and it became a book. And I was very pleased with it. And my husband, who's my third husband, has been very complimentary. This is your best thing yet. And I thought, it might be. So that gave me the courage to publish it, and I'm
Yeah,
glad I did.
it's we have to state, obviously, before we carry on with this straight away, Judy, as well. You do talk about some quite weighty topics in this book straight away. Did you find? We'd have to just jump into it and give people a warning that there is obviously talking about abuse now, but like you had, I think, a very complicated relationship with your father straight away. Now,
Uh, would you like me to talk about that?
yes, please. I think people have to
Okay.
know straight away. I think because I best way to put it would be is I've had a good relationship with my parents now, but it wasn't great when I was younger, and I think it makes you what you are as a person. I think.
It does. It does. Or at least it sets you up for a certain way of being, and then you can try to tinker with yourself,
Yeah,
as it were, to improve yourself.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, looking back, I really had a traumatic childhood. My father, who was an extremely successful businessman, he was vice president for one of the United States' largest corporations, a total corporate. I leave the next word blank.
A beep, yes,
A
yes.
beep, yes, a bleep. Uh, did not know how to be an intimate or loving person. In fact, he wouldn't even let us call my brother and me. He wouldn't even let us call him dad. He was phobic. He made us call him by his first name, which I won't say because people could identify him. I'm still protecting him at that level. He used to come into my room when I was a teenager, into the doorway to my room with no clothes on, basically, except a t-shirt. And I grew up terrified that I was going to get raped. It was like a mock execution. I don't know if you've heard of that, but where
Yeah,
terrorists pretend to shoot somebody while their loved ones are watching, and it's utterly terrifying. And making matters much, much worse was the fact that my mother, how could she not have known where her husband was going every night undressed, knowing she had a teenage daughter right down the hall? I mean, how could she not know that? So she did not protect me from that, nor did she protect my brother and me from my father's rage or his alcoholism. She couldn't protect herself either. And that's very common in these situations. When the mother doesn't protect the children, it's often because she can't protect herself. And that doesn't minimize the damage to the child, but it's not an excuse, but it's sort of an explanation. Um, and she was also a very superficial person. She was just very unable to feel deep feelings or to understand me or my brother when we were children. So I really grew up without what the psychologists call a secure attachment. Psychologically, there was nobody home for me. And that happens a lot in families where there's abuse and in families where there's alcoholism. So the first couple of chapters of my book are really, they're my story, but I also expand it, giving a lot of statistics and sort of psychological insight into what happens to kids when they grow up in a family like this, where there's no emotional core to the family, and the child ends up kind of working his or her rear end off trying to make things okay, but they're never really okay, until, in my case, psychotherapy has been incredibly helpful. I still find it helpful, but compared to where I started, I'm way more whole, I would put it. So if there's a take home from that part of the book, that would be it. And there's just so many women, especially, who've grown up with this, and in a lot of cases, the perpetrator of the abuse is the parent of the child. So my story is not that unusual. People have trouble believing that there are people like this in the world and that they run their families this way, but it's unfortunately way more common than people think. So that was one reason I decided to sort of use myself as a vehicle to spread that word. I didn't dwell as much on the mother part, and I wish I had, because that's equally, if not more, damaging to people. I have a friend who could not protect her children, and the children are mad at her to this day, and she's almost 90. The damage that does is huge to children.
No. Yeah, I know people like that, and I know cases like that. People are very dear to me that had a lot of trouble with their father, certainly, and it's run through the family. And I think what I really enjoyed about your book, Judy, was the fact was your book is a message of a story of hope. Really, you've not let like a bad start stop you. You've lived incredibly fibrous life. That's a good way of putting it straight away.
Well, thank you. I mean, and that makes me feel good. I mean, it has been a struggle, an ongoing struggle, and I do feel proud of the therapy work I've done. I'm proud of the journalism too, but I mean the professional stuff I could do with one arm tied behind my back. The therapy stuff is much, much harder. The inner work is much harder than the outer work, I think. But oh, so worthwhile. Totally worthwhile.
Yeah, no, definitely that one straight away with it. I think as well, I found it very interesting with your book, and it's obviously like we have to tell people you've been married 3 times, and I think each of your relationships, I think, reflects. I've got ex partners in married 3 times before I met my wife, and each one of her marriages was at that a certain point in life when she needed something, because she had trouble with her parents as well, and it was like, did you find when you're looking back writing this book, did you surprise yourself in any way with some of the things you're writing about?
I'd like to answer your implied question first. I think
if sorry, I've asked two. Sorry.
If I heard you right, you are saying you're the only person who's asked me about this, and I find this very true. That I've had 3 husbands. I'm still with my 3rd one, thank goodness. That each of them was actually appropriate for where I was maturationally at that point. And as I got healthier, I have had much more intimate, close relationships, much deeper and much closer relationships. And that's wonderful. I mean, because I personally couldn't have traveled the long distance I have psychologically and stayed with the same person. And hard as my only divorce was on my son, it was absolutely necessary for me to grow. I mean, my first husband and I met the first mixer of freshman year in college. We were 18, and our maturity was at 18. You know, we just really didn't have it. It was love and lust and fun and everything, but we were not grown-ups. And that's the truth, unfortunately. But what was your second question? I know that the maturation and the partners was one question, but the other question?
I think I was
Oh,
thinking more along the lines of,
what
sorry.
surprised me?
Yeah, what surprised you?
What
That was it. Sorry,
surprised
yes.
you?
Sorry, yes. I forgot myself then.
uh, in a sense that, you know, writing the memoir made me think my life was more coherent than I thought it was, because both as a person making sense of her history and in therapy, and also as a journalist, it's really been a search for truth. And I am a passionate advocate of free speech and our First Amendment. I really believe, you know, I forget whether it was Jefferson or who it was, but better anarchy than control of the press. You know, we really need a free press to be a watchdog over government, over business, other things. So I really, really think blocking speech, silencing speech is much more dangerous. In fact, there's a wonderful, wonderful book by the late New York Times columnist Anthony Lewis that's called Freedom for the Speech We Hate. You know, you have a democracy has to be able to tolerate multiple viewpoints and not suppress any, because suppression is worse.
Yeah, I agree.
Is more dangerous. Anyway, that's the end of my rant. But but what the cohesive thing has been a search for truth.
Yeah, you can feel it when you review this book. It is, and if you look round, there is lots of autobiographies knocking round, and various topics. Yours is quite a distinctive book, actually, because I think it's not necessarily about your life. It read to me like of your journey to
Yeah.
your own self expression, and I did really enjoy the elements when you put in like articles from, was it the Boston Globe that were in this book?
Yes.
There was a
Yes.
number of articles in it. I
Yes.
think they really built up the actual picture of you as a person. And that's
Oh,
why.
good.
So
Oh, I'm
that's
glad
why,
to hear
because
that.
what you've done is, like, if people wonder where the book is, not a particularly long book actually.
No, it's too
It's
short.
it's very short actually. Yeah, my novel's coming out. It's about the same length actually. But I
Yeah.
think what you've done is you've packed a lot into this very very short book, and that I think
Well,
is respect.
that's the journalist in me. You learn to write really tight as a journalist.
Yeah, you said
Expanding is hard. You know?
you do. I think my wife does a lot of copywriting for people, and she gets told to write specific lengths all the time. And she's very good now doing
Absolutely.
that sort of thing. I'm a poet and I just ramble on and on and on. But yeah, but yours is like it's for a book like that, a lesser skilled writer would have probably done 500 pages.
Yeah. Well, actually, I teach memoir writing now.
Oh, do you? Oh, whoa.
Yeah, at this Harvard program I was telling you about.
Mm.
And short is almost always better. Not always, but almost always. And you know, my students have trouble with that, but some of the best writers are the ones who are really, you know, don't have extra distracting stuff in what they write. But
Yeah,
most people
yeah.
the opposite.
Yeah, you do like it's obviously if you're going on your local bookshops, there's tons of them where massive hardbacks people's lives, and half the time I don't want to read them. Because
Exactly.
and you
Exactly.
see 600 pages, and I'm sat there thinking, oh Christ,
I'm
no.
reading a 600-page book now by Barbara Kingsolver, and whoa, boy, it's fabulous, but it's long. It's
Oh,
really long.
I don't have the patience. I really don't, to be honest. At
I
the best
know.
of times,
Especially
that's
if
what.
you read at nighttime when you're about to fall asleep, you know, you sort of give up.
Oh, I used to do a lot of mine because I've got a bit of a commute to my day job on my bus, and I used to make sure I've got a book in my bag because I do my reading going to work and from work. That's why that's all mine is. But yeah, it's trying to do it, and then Amanda, my wife, works because she does a lot of hers through Audible, and the amount of time she's felt gone to bed for me, I've gone in and she's asleep, and she's
Hmm.
missed two chapters out, and she doesn't know where she's up to the following day because she fell
Right,
asleep.
right. What is your day job?
Um, Currently, I'm working in a back office of a solicitors at the moment.
Oh, right, right. You said that.
But that's changing shortly anyway. So long story.
Uh-huh.
That's why. But yeah, it's as I said, I love reading. I always have done, and that's why I love doing spoken label. It gives a chance to meet people like yourself, Judy, and we can hear your
Yeah.
story behind that. So on this book, then, obviously, has it changed much from when you just started writing the book?
Did the book change?
Yes.
Well, yes, I left some things out and added other things. As I said before, I had a huge stockpile of memoirs, and I put some in, and I found myself taking some out to kind of balance things. And I did some parts that I put in to weave it all together, some sort of transitional things. So I worked really hard on the organization part.
Yeah,
Um,
feels like it. I've got to ask
yeah,
you
oh,
then,
good.
where did the title come from then?
Ah,
Because
I thought you
that's
might get
quite a long title up for a book, I think, actually.
it is. The story behind that is my husband, my current husband, and I were taking a hike in the Swiss Alps in the winter on the snow. And it was a beautiful day in Zermatt. And, we had stopped for lunch in one of those high restaurants. And we were walking back. It was still, there's still a lot of sunlight, still beautiful day. And I suddenly stopped on the trail and turned around to look at him. And I said, gee, a line from W.H. Auden just popped into my head. And I am not a poet and I don't really know poetry, but this line just jumped into my head. And the line was, if equal affection cannot be, let the more loving one be me. And I said that to him, and we both just sort of stood there, and tears filled our eyes. And I said to him, he said, that's kind of like a marriage vow. We were already married, but he said, that's like a marriage vow. And I said, it really is. And then I kind of paused and I said, let the more loving one be me. And then he just gave me a huge hug and said, let the more loving one be me. So that was such a sweet story. I decided to make that the title.
Yeah, it's beautiful. That's it. Really is. It shows, I think, that you said before in this, I think when you get older sometimes, you learn how to get the relationships you have with people change. And that to
Yeah,
come out with something like that, that's plain poetry. That's from a poet. So yeah, so definitely
yeah,
with
that's
that.
what a
So
poet does.
yeah,
Exactly.
to complete an accident, a marathon, it's beautiful. And it's a beautiful book, there's no two ways about it. Do you envisage
Okay.
you will do a second version, a second collection of memoirs over time?
Possibly, but I think I'm more inclined. I really enjoy doing these medical thrillers or science thrillers. And I'm partway through another one, so that's more fun. So
Yeah.
fun matters. So I think I'm gonna
Yeah, I
do
think it
that.
does. When you're doing
Uh,
fiction, it can be more fun
yeah,
because I think when
it
you're having to
is.
do, you do. I know it's been a poet. You dig too deep sometimes, and it causes you more problems than it's worth. So
I know. It's true, but it's also fun. I had fun with some pieces, and I have a fun piece if you want me to tell that story
oh yes, yes,
about
please, yes, please, yes, please, yes.
uh, how I how I got into journalism.
Yeah, I'd love to hear
Um,
that. Yeah, yes, please.
all right, it's not too long. Okay, it was an inauspicious start to a journalism career. I was 17. So was everybody else, except the long suffering crew crammed aboard the SS Seven Seas. The Seven Seas, wildly rumored to be condemned as unseaworthy, was carrying 700 of us, American Field Service students all. We were heading home from a summer living with European host families. We were happy, considerably fatter than we had been when we left the US 3 months ago, and full of newly discovered sophistication. We boarded the ship through the gangway and, still carrying our bags, stopped to see the bulletin board, jostling to read the dozens of handwritten signs. Editor needed for shipboard daily newspaper, read one. I could do that, I thought, but I was a girl, and girls were not editors, or so I assumed. So I turned to the mousy looking boy standing next to me. Want to do this? I asked. I will if you will. Sure, he said. And off we went, snaking our way up one dark shipboard stairway and down another, looking for the quote unquote newsroom, a microscopic cubbyhole with a couple of worn chairs, reams of waiting blank paper, and a very old, balky mimeograph machine. We plopped down in chairs and eyed each other. The boy, whose name I can't remember now and barely could during our entire 10-day voyage, had absolutely no journalism experience. I had written a few saccharine, quote, letters from Denmark to my hometown paper, the Baltimore Sun, raving about the pastries in my host family and offering sophomoric insights into world affairs. I had also written for my high school newspaper more saccharine features about hunky football players and a fast track star we called the Flying Finn. He and I decided to be a daily, this other editor. We didn't seem to have a boss or supervisor of any sort, and we clearly had no competition. Nobody else seemed to have seen the sign on the bulletin board. So we wrote silly stuff, pieces about the food. We listed jokes about how rickety the ship seemed and features about the countries we had visited. Bland but blissful. I had never been happier. I spent the days covered in mimeograph ink, thrilled to pass out our daily efforts and watch as people gathered in small groups to read them. I would hardly have called myself an investigative reporter, but about halfway through the trip, I stumbled upon a shocker. Some of the AFS students confided that they had become very friendly with their host nationals. Even the girls hinted that they had had sex with boys from the countries they visited. I was from Pelham, for heaven's sakes. Nobody had sex in Pelham. I went to church. I was in the choir. I was a bell ringer. I was a Girl Scout. I was a cheerleader. I didn't drink. I didn't swear. I more or less got straight A's. I was an AFS student. I was working for world peace, and they were having sex. Aha. I also had access to a mimeograph machine. So in the heat of passion, I wrote an editorial fiercely lambasting my fellow students for tarnishing the image of AFS and Americans abroad. Who did they think they were, messing around, breaking the rules, ruining our mission? We were the force for good, for purity. We were the youth of America, the future of the world. What were these kids thinking? Fueled by the outrage of the naive, I went on in what I assumed was a well-written, much-needed piece. Much to my relief, I no longer have a copy. When I ran out of steam, my co-editor read the editorial, didn't say much, picked a phrase from my piece, and slapped it on as a headline, "The Lousy Few." I cranked up the mimeograph machine, handed out copies, and went to dinner, aglow with righteous fervor. I was so right. They were so wrong. Back in my cabin, my roommates, despite my showing up every night covered in mimeograph ink, didn't seem to suspect that I was the editor. They read the editorial and cracked up. Laughter? That was the last thing I expected. This was serious. I was serious and suddenly scared. I announced that I was seasick, asked them to bring me some soup, and hid under the covers. The next morning, I tried to sneak back to the newsroom. People might know my name, but they didn't know my face. When I got to the dining room, I bumped into a huge parade of kids carrying a banner made from a bedsheet. "The lousy few," it proclaimed proudly. The students were having a ball. They shouted, they pumped their fists, they sang, "The lousy few, the lousy few." They also yelled that they were going to find and torture whoever had written that editorial. Mortified and stunned at the depth of my own naivety, I was also suddenly aware of a new feeling. I was ecstatic that people had actually read what I'd written. I was in awe. I could move people with my words. What power! I skulked away from the demonstration, eventually making it back to the newsroom. "They actually read this stuff," I said to my co-editor. He shrugged. We vowed to keep putting out the paper for the rest of the trip. I kept faking seasickness whenever I was in the cabin and never told my cabin mates I was the editor. I hid my purple ink-stained clothes. Today, more than 60 years later, numerous journalism awards, and 5 books, I am still amazed that I can move people with my words and that I can have so much fun doing it.
That is such a great piece, that an extract from the book,
Thank
indeed.
you.
So I think it does is what it does is people will see the book itself is very hard hitting in places, particularly a bit like your father. But then like you produce part segments of the book like that later on. I think it
Yeah.
shows your growth as a person. And I think I'm really pleased you read that because it's a great example of the book that is itself.
Thank
Like
you.
it, it's definitely. I recommend everyone check this book out definitely. So now, I think we're going to conclude with obviously two quick things in this one. You've told us a little hint already about your second medical thriller book. Is there much you want to reveal about that yet?
Uh, just that it's another thriller, and it's about the wind farm business, the offshore winds. And obviously, we need wind power as much as solar power. But there's an evil character in this book, too. And he also gets outed by a spunky young female reporter. But I probably said too much.
What I
I'm
will
sure
ask you
I
now,
said,
what I
I'm
will
sure I
ask
said,
you, what I will
okay.
ask you more generally, because my wife Amanda wrote about 8 novels she has, and
She's
each
written 8
book,
novels.
yeah, she's written 8 novels, yeah. she's,
Wow.
I know she's talking about doing a non-fiction book at the moment, so but we'll see. Now, what I want to know is very quickly on this is how is the relationship of your second book going in comparison to your first fiction book? Is it proving quite a different book to write, or easier maybe?
Harder, much harder, because I knew a lot of the biology in the first book. There's a lot I've had to learn about wind farms and wind power and the environmental movement and all that stuff. So I'm on more foreign territory. But the hero from the first book is also the heroine. The heroine from the first book is also the heroine for the second book.
Oh, oh.
So it's like if I ever do a series, I've got my heroine.
Sorted then, aren't you? So
Yeah.
definitely. Now, obviously, to wrap up then, obviously, with today, Judy, if people want people to find out more about you, where do you recommend they go?
You can go to my website, which is judyforeman.com, and that's JUDYF as in Frank, OREMAN.com. You can also get any or all of the books on Amazon or any of the other book websites, but Amazon is certainly the most prominent one.
Brilliant. That's all my questions today then. So
Well,
it's
that's
been
all
a
my
pleasure,
answers.
Judy.
Thank
I've
you.
really,
Thank you. Thank you
really,
very
really
much.
enjoyed it. So
Me
hang
too.
around because I need to quick word you off microphone anyway. But I have really enjoyed this today, and it's been an absolute, definitely a pleasure, not a privilege, to read this book. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I can only recommend it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks again, Judy. Right, everybody, that's it for Unspoken Label today for another episode. Thanks to Judy, and take care, guys and girls, and we will see you all next. Well, I can find the stop button next time.